I love the cool of the morning in the forest, yes? We call it the bush, but you call it the forest. And now it's starting to warm up. And we're so glad that we live in bodies that have the ability to adapt and adjust. And that is a great introduction to my class this morning. It's called The Gift of Pain. And you might say, well, Sister Barbara, I would never call pain a gift. But as I go through this presentation this morning, I think you'll see it a little differently. As I begin, I'd like to ask the greatest teacher this world has ever known to teach us this morning. Father, thank you so much for our bodies. Thank you so much for the way they work. Give us understanding, Father, that we might understand them better, that we might be able to present these bodies as living sacrifices, even in spite of pain, and what to do with pain. We ask that you teach us, and we ask in the name of Jesus, amen. I call the class The Gift of Pain because about 2 years ago I was given a book called The Gift of Pain by Dr. Paul Brandt, and I thought, interesting title. But as I studied pain, I was intrigued. And as the author points out, pain is a gift. You see, this author, he worked with leprosy cases. And you know, in leprosy cases, they lose their toes, they lose their fingers, and they always come to the conclusions it's because of lack of stimulation to that area, they lose feeling in that area. But he found it was something else. He found it was something else, and he was first brought to this when a man with leprosy came and he had a wound on the bottom of his foot. They dressed the wound and they sent him away. And Dr. Brand watched the man walk away, and he was just walking. Bit of a limp, but he's just walking like this. And he thought, he's walking on that foot, and it must be incredibly painful. And then he realized they have no feeling. They have no feeling. And so you and I, we would not walk on it because it's so painful. And he started to watch, and he realized they were losing their limbs because they kept knocking them. They kept knocking them, and then walking on them, which caused total deterioration, and they lost them. So what he did was he arranged for that man to have a boot, like a plastic boot, so that and to tell him to only walk on his heel. And that's when he started to realize that pain is actually a gift. It's a message. It's telling us something. Thus the title of his book, The Gift of Pain. We live in this incredible body that has been designed by God to heal itself. And it heals in remarkable ways that we often don't anticipate. And as I mentioned last night, this healing is explained to us in Exodus 15:26. And in Exodus 15:26, Moses is talking to the children of Israel. He says, if you will diligently hearken, this is listen. If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God. The lepers could not listen. There was no voice coming from their extremities. They couldn't listen. They couldn't hear. So they kept walking on it, kept knocking it, causing more and more and more damage. God said, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God. Now, the voice of God comes in many ways. I'm in a room that's up high in the dwelling there, and I had all the lights out, and I was very tired, and I looked out the window, and I saw something. And I don't know whether you've seen it. I don't know whether it was glowworms or fireflies. Have you seen them? Fireflies. I know in Australia, in the bush, we lived in the rainforest, there were fireflies. And I just stood fascinated at these little lights going on and off, on and off. And that's why I love to have my lights out. That's why I love, even early in the morning, not have a torch, because your eyes adjust and you see things. When we diligently hearken to the voice of God, do you know your eyes listen? How do your eyes listen? They listen from what they see. And as I looked at these little fireflies, don't you love that sound? And as I listened by looking at these fireflies, I heard the voice of God. And we see and we hear the voice of God in the beauty of nature. We see it in the beauty of these plants. These are Boston ferns. I love Boston ferns. And I love the impatiens flowers. Do you know there is no purpose for flower? The purpose of a flower is to bring joy to our hearts. And it's also an illustration of the wonderful love of God towards us. So if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God in nature, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God in your body, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God in the Word of God. He says, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God and do that which is right in his sight. This is an incredible piece of organism that we all live in. An incredible piece of organism. And when you do right by this organism, do you know it works? I saw on you call it a gas station. It always puzzles us because it's not gas, it's petrol, isn't it? We call it in Australia a petrol station. So I was driving past a petrol station. I saw a huge big sign and a very good-looking young man, obviously an actor, next to this fancy car. I don't know. Michael says, what car was it? I said it was red. That's all I know. It was red. But it was low. It looked pretty fancy. He said, I only want the best fuel for my car. And I thought, I wonder if that man says, I only want the best fuel for my body. Because if that car ends up in a ditch, and I have to tell you, their car ended up in a ditch yesterday. We had to pull him out. So Narlon's right. He can end up in a ditch. If it ends up in a ditch and it gets scratched, or you can just buy another one. But what about this body? How much more important it is to choose only the best. Do that which is right by my body. People say to me, Barbara, it must be so hard. You travel so much to eat well. I said, I eat very well. I choose to only eat well. I'm in the airport. We do as much as we can. We often travel with avocado, maybe some crackers, always some nuts. But sometimes there's several flights and phew. But you know what you can always buy in an airport? A banana. Have you noticed? It's in a sterile container. Peel. In body straight away. And you know what you can always buy? A little packet of nuts. There's a good bit of protein there. And you can usually get an apple and usually get an orange. I only choose the best fuel for this body. Because it is true that we are what we eat. And last night we looked at the blood. The blood is very interesting. Because the blood, as Thomas Jackson says, the best medical book we have is the Bible. Leviticus 17:11, it says the life of the flesh is in the blood. So the Bible calls the blood the life of the flesh. Why? Because in the blood we've got red blood cells. And those red blood cells carry our nutrients. Those red blood cells carry oxygen. Those red blood cells carry water. Those red blood cells take away waste, and us living machineries, there's always some waste. But the blood also contains white blood cells, and we looked at those last night. That's our internal army. No wonder the Bible calls the blood the life of the flesh. We touched on water therapies and how water therapy brings more blood to an injured area. Quite remarkable. But the only time you can't put a foot in a bucket of hot water is if that foot has no feeling. And the only time you can't put a foot into a bucket of hot water is if that foot is cold. There is common sense, yeah? And God gave it to us, no matter who you are, no matter what your qualifications, no matter if you don't have any qualifications. Someone said to me, what are your qualifications? I said, I'm a mother of 8 BAs. And I'm a grandmother of 25, and I'm a 25 and a half. And I'm a great-grandmother of 4. They're my qualifications. Do you know, you learn a lot, especially when you live in a rainforest and you homeschool and you birth and breastfeed and do everything yourself. You learn a lot. And that's why God says, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God and do. Got that word, do. Do that which is right in his sight. Give ear to his commandments. Keep all of these statutes. He says, I will put none of these diseases upon thee that I put upon the Egyptians or brought upon the Egyptians, because I am the Lord that healeth thee. He is the healer. And one way he heals us is through pain. Now, we don't like pain. It really is speaking to us, isn't it? So 18 months ago, when I'm walking on the rocks by the sea with my little grandchildren, and I trod on a slippery bit, whoa, my whole body went up and slammed down. And I felt intense pain. Intense. And it did not stop. And as my arms swelled and got in the most strangest shape, and the lifeguard came running and said, go straight to the hospital. I knew this needed more than a poultice. But you know what told me? The intense pain. The intense pain. And I can't say to you, can you feel my pain? You cannot feel my pain. Only I can feel my pain. And I know, as working as a nurse and working as a natural therapist, I can tell if someone's in pain. It's like the nurse that came into the room one morning, and there's a man and he's holding onto the end of the bed. He's white, his perspiration stripping, he's holding like this. She said, are you in pain? He went, no, he's in a lot of pain. But he didn't want to complain. Anyway, she immediately, his one area had swollen up intensely. I have found that what causes pain mostly is inflammation. Now, what caused me intense pain was a broken bone. Now, I can't see inside that arm, but the look of it and the intensity of the pain told me, whoa, I'll need a little bit more help here. And so I had it in a pool of water by the sea. And my little granddaughter, she's 8, her name's Sophia. She said, breathe, Nana, breathe. 5 in, hold, 5 out. My son has taught her breath work. Breath work is an amazing thing. The laws of health. One of the laws of health is inhale. Inhale through the nose. And yes, it did help. And you know why it helped? Because inhaling through the nose, using my abdominal muscles, stimulated my parasympathetic nervous system. Do you know what your parasympathetic nervous system? Your peaceful, calming nervous system. But if I was breathing like this, that would stimulate my sympathetic nervous system, which would cause me more stress. Just through breath. And I showed you last night in the little book, The Ministry of Healing, she calls these laws of health the true remedies. And they are. So how do they hold up in pain? Use of water, sunshine. How does that help with pain? I'll show you. Sleep. This is where our body revives and recharges. Trust. Trust. Last night we looked at faith. I tell you, it took a lot of faith for me to believe that this would ever heal, because it didn't feel like it. But faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's It's the evidence of things not seen. If you can see it, it's not faith. There are some things that must stop if you want your body working in the best performance. And you can see right now that I obviously have a hand that works. It heals. Now, when they x-rayed it, the radius was not only totally broken, but out of place. No wonder it was in pain. Now, if I had been able to be seen by the orthopedic surgeon in 1 hour, I probably would have only needed 1 dose of pain-killing medication. And I have to say, in a crisis, pain-killing medication can help. But I sat there for 6 hours. Why did I have to sit there for 6 hours? I'm so glad God doesn't show us the future. Aren't you? Oh, do you know what I love about God? He's just given us today. And actually, he's just given this moment. And in a moment, he'll give another moment. So why did I have to sit there? Because the whole system was chocked up with people that don't know how to look after themselves. A lady came in, my little finger sore. Another person came in, my elbow sore. Another person came in, my heart's racing. Another person came in, wow, they're just coming in one after the other. Gravy went on my hand. Another person came in, I feel sick. And the nurse said, have you had anything to drink today? Oh, only a few glasses of wine. So I sat there thinking, I can't believe this. They say we are an enlightened age. I do not think so. I think we're dumb. We don't even know how to look after ourselves, our bodies, just the basics. I sat there thinking I could help him, I could fix 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 him. But of course I can't. I'm sitting there still in my beach attire in the most terrible pain. Finally, I was seen. The skill of the orthopedic surgeon I appreciate. He pulled it back into place. He looked at it and said, pretty good. That was enough for me. He plastered it and I went home. Do you know that when that bone was back in place, I didn't have pain anymore? See, pain is a signal. It is a sign. And so when I was talking to a man a couple of years ago, his late 40s, when he was late 30s, he was in a motorboat and his friend was driving it. They had a family on board. They hit a wave from another boat going by. He went up in the air because he was at the back and he came down hard on his coccyx. Ooh, almost hurts to hear that story. He was in very bad pain. Helicopter came, took him to hospital. Yes, there's a bit of a crack in his coccyx. Compression of all of his vertebrae. So they gave him very strong painkillers and he laid in bed for a week, went home with very strong painkillers. What's his life now? Painkillers, just painkillers. And what do you do? And he's in the most terrible pain. He cannot live without those painkillers. Speaking to his wife, she said it was terrible. If I didn't feel so sorry for him, I would have left him. When he was in pain, we all got yelled at. It was just terrible. And when he had the painkillers, it was like everything was perfectly fine. She said it was a vicious cycle. Now, she was a Christian, but she was, I guess, the lady, they just went to church every Sabbath and then went home again. But then a friend gave her a series of Walter Wythe. I don't know if you've heard of Walter Wythe, but he gives an excellent series looking at Bible prophecy and what's happening in the world today and how God is overall, and she was amazed. And after watching this series for a week, she surrendered her heart to God. She totally surrendered her heart to God. Then she wanted to know, what does God want of her? She said, he's done so much for me, what can I give him? And then she read in Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2, Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2, the Bible says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, meaning I plead with you to present your bodies living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Do you know why it's so reasonable? Because we are the ones that benefit when we live in a body that works. Am I right? And she looked at her kitchen cupboard, she looked at what they're eating, and she said, I don't think we're eating right. She started to go to a big shop and got some organic food, started to get some recipe books, started to ease out the ice creams and the sugars and the artificial food that is not really food at all. You see, our blood is the life of the flesh. When we are feeding the right nutrients, if we're not feeding the right nutrients, the body cannot function properly and it actually can't even heal. So Michael and I have 4 boys, 4 girls, and our 4 boys are all tradesmen. You know, very rare commodity today. Unfortunately, every young person just wants to do computers. So our boys make a lot of money because they're in high demand, because they can build houses, they can build bathrooms, they can... So let's say we say to our boys, boys, can you do an extension on our house? And they come, and they're very good tradesmen, because I brought up in a house where honour and integrity was taught. When you do a job, you do it well. And they've got their, I don't know, all their equipment, you know, whatever hammers, maybe they don't even use hammers now, I don't know, but all the stuff that they have. And they say, okay, where's the building materials? And we say, oh, we couldn't afford them. Can't you just chop that old tree down over there? They're excellent tradesmen, but unless they have the right building materials, they cannot build a house. This body was designed by God with this incredible inbuilt ability to heal, and to heal very well. But it needs the right nutrients. We are the ones that choose the nutrients that are going in. We are the ones that choose how much oxygen's going in by the way we breathe. We are the ones that choose how much water's going in. We are the ones that determine whether our blood is the life of the flesh or the death of the flesh. Because poisons are going in. And that's why God said, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, you present your bodies living sacrifices, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world. We know how the world eats. Just go down the road. Just go, maybe it's a bit more than down the road here. Just go to Costco's. And you know, when you come in and all that food you see there, it's all rubbish. Have you noticed? White cakes with green icing and sprinkles on top. It's just poison. It's just poison. But there's a great deceiver out there. The Bible says he's deceived the whole world into thinking it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you eat. It does matter what you eat. To deceive people into thinking it doesn't matter what you build your house out of. It does. I've just been to Germany. Do you know, there are houses there that have been there for 500-600 years. They're renovating them because they're so well built. They said the houses that were built 50 years ago are falling apart. Cheap and nasty building materials. These houses still stand. Will your house still stand? So we have an incredible body. It's got the ability to heal itself. So this lady, the wife of the man who had the accident, she became convicted. She got to start getting her body right. Her husband came and watched too. And he became convicted. I want to live right. I want to give my life to God. I want to present my body a living sacrifice. But I'm living on painkillers. Do you know, God is a solution God, and he has a way through this. What are those pain-killing medication doing? Yeah, they're masking the pain. Did you hear what I said? Masking. Masking the pain. He didn't feel it. I'm so glad that the drugs I went on masked my pain, because I tell you that was very, very painful. Very painful. But you know, I took it for a few hours. That was it. But this man, he's been taking it for, I think it was nearly a year. And if you just Google the name of those painkillers and have a look at their side effects, look at what else does to the liver. Look at how it... Do you know what they do? They leach the minerals out of your bones. They actually poison your body. They poison different organs, especially your liver, especially your kidneys. So he was confronted. He got to do something. And because he trained as a doctor, he knew the body. And he knew that the skeletal system is actually useless by itself. Now, we all went to school, I'm sure, most of us. My children didn't, they were homeschooled. But in a science department, there's a skeleton hanging there, is that right? And they can't just put it there, they have to hold it up on a rod, is that right? Otherwise it'll just be a mess on the floor. And that's what we would be, a mess on the floor, if it wasn't for muscles, ligaments, tendons. That's what holds us up. And that is what we can do something about. Our muscles are made up of the nutrients we give them. Our muscles are fed, every cell, by oxygen, by water. Our joints are kept lubricated by the amount of water that we're drinking. So he theorized if he built up his muscles. Our core muscles sit here, and our core muscles are connected to our hip and our spine. Transverse abdominis is the name of our own private girdle. Transverse abdominis is the muscle that sweeps around to the spine. So he theorized if he strengthened his core muscles, it would strengthen his spine. And little by little by little, he started strengthening core, strengthening core, strengthening core. He was also mindful of the way he picked things up. How does a 2-year-old pick up a ball? Have you noticed? This is how they pick up a ball. Am I right? How do we pick up balls, most adults? Do you know, when you bend that spine like that, you weaken your spine. I think nearly everyone's challenged with back issues, am I right? We've got to look after this back. How do we start picking up balls like this? Got that? Strengthening the core muscles. Because the biggest bone in the body is the femur. The biggest muscle mass in the body is our quads. And that's what God designed we bend with. Watch the 2-year-old. We've got to start bending the way the 2-year-old does. Picking up the way the 2-year-old does. So he became mindful through the study of the body. He started to realize what he could do. And when I met him, it was about 7 years after this. When I met him, he's 50, very fit, very fit. He said, I have no pain. Did you hear that? No pain, I am off all my medication. He said it took me about 6 months to little by little ease off it and to build up my core muscles. A lady emailed me, she said, I've got a slip disc, I've got a spur growing there, what can I do? She did not like my answer. She wrote back and she said, I'm very disappointed with your answer. Because what did I tell her to do? Strengthen the core. Muscle knows no age. Whether you are 9 or 90, you can have strong muscles. I have met now 5 men in my travels with serious injuries. They shouldn't even be walking. But remember that skeletal system that could be just a lump on the floor? The muscles, the ligaments, the tendons. Those 5 men are all now pain-free, medication-free, because they looked at this incredible body that God's given us and they built it up. They worked and they worked on it. But we're going to have strong bones too. And those strong bones need sunshine, because when the ultraviolet rays from the sun hit the skin, they convert a form of cholesterol just under the skin to vitamin D. Excuse me, what's converted? Cholesterol? Hopefully your cholesterol level never goes under 200, and hopefully it's up near 300. Did you hear what I said? Please come to the next meeting where I'm going to talk about the heart. If your cholesterol levels go too low, you will not be able to make your vitamin D. And vitamin D is essential in the assimilation and the utilization of calcium, and our bones are not made out of calcium, they're made out of minerals. 12 main minerals and 64 trace minerals. And when the vitamin D is present and gets the calcium into the cell, all the other minerals piggyback on the back of the calcium. Where do the cows get strong bones from? Green grass. I've got some good news. We don't have to eat the grass, but we can eat kale and we can eat lettuce. So down here in the south you got collard greens, is that right? We never heard of them. And lamb's quarters. And it's not the lamb, is it? And you do not lose your minerals when you cook them, because the mineral content of the food is determined, by the mineral content of the food. So even cooking it, you do not lose minerals. So after 6 weeks, I went and had my arm X-rayed, because they were a bit concerned, because remember what the orthopedic surgeon said? Pretty good, not perfect. You see, I'd gone home and cut half the plaster off so that I could put comfy poultices on there. So I went back after 4 weeks and they X-rayed my arm, and they looked at me, they looked at my age, they looked at the X-ray, they looked at each other. Basically, this is an impossibility. It's healed. In 4 weeks, healed. They're just scratching their heads. And they thought maybe the date of birth's wrong. How old are you? 70. They couldn't understand it, and they really didn't know what I'd done. I don't think so much. I think the comfrey helped, but you know what I think did the most? The nutrients that I give this body, I gave the body, and you know I didn't drink cow's milk. Well, the cows don't drink cow's milk to get strong bones. Where do they get their greens? The greens. The greens. The greens. But they wanted to replaster it because it really needs 6 weeks. I said, righto. And the nurse plastering it said, do you have osteoporosis? I said, no. He said, did you have a test? I said, no. He just started laughing. So how do I know I don't have osteoporosis? Well, when my body went up in the air and slammed down on this big rock, more than that would have broken, am I right? That's the sort of testing I do. That's the only sort of testing I do. If it works, it must be right. In fact, when I went to hospital, they said, is anything else sore? I said, no. It might have been, but I couldn't feel another thing because of that pain. That pain. In the book, The Ministry of Healing, she says, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. If there is pain in the body, you've got to look for the cause, because there is always a cause. Proverbs 26 verse 2 states that the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, no problem happens without a cause. There's always a cause. So when someone says to me, my knee's sore, what do? I put my detective hat on, because there's always a reason. Always. I said, did you have an injury there? Well, many years ago. Do you know what I find? It's not so much the injury, it's the treatment after the injury. When they took my hand out of plaster, the physiotherapist said, now do this. I could not. I could not even move it. See, I underestimated the tissue damage, the muscle damage, the ligament damage. So I went home and I started to apply castor oil. Every night I applied castor oil. Consistency is the key. castor oil every night. Now I can totally do it. 6 months, every night I applied castor oil. Why castor oil? Castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And wherever castor oil penetrates, it breaks up lumps, bumps, adhesions, scar tissue. It'll even break up a bone spur. It'll even break up a bunion. Isn't God good? Psalm 104 verse 14, God gave herbs for the service of man. They are there to serve you. It wasn't long after this that a friend of mine told me about her mother-in-law, who's 65, who fell on the slippery floor in the bathroom and broke very badly here, even to the point of putting pins in. After 6 weeks, there was no healing. No healing, and they put it down to her age. But when I found out what that lady, she didn't drink water. She might have 1 glass a day. You know what she drinks a lot of? Tea and coffee. Do you know what tea and coffee do? Leach minerals out of the body. Eeh. And this lady, she doesn't eat any fruits and vegetables. She eats a lot of carbohydrates. She works in a cake shop. And do you know what cakes are high in? Refined sugar. And you know what refined sugar does? Leaches more minerals out of the body. That's why the only hope of Bitter Things is the education of people in the right principles, because so many people don't realize that what they're doing to their body is weakening and hurting their body. So in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, unhealthful conditions changed. We have seen many people sick whose houses are on under the big electrical wires. We've seen many people sick because they live in a mouldy house. You've got to search these things out. Unhealthful conditions change, wrong habits corrected. And this is what the man who had the major back injury found, that when he started to change his lifestyle, he stopped the coffee, he stopped the sugar, they stopped the ice cream, he started to eat nourishing food. His blood now became the life of the flesh. And here he is now. He said to me, I work out in the gym for 1 hour a day. I cycle 6 miles every afternoon. Now, that's 5 days a week. He must maintain his strength. He said, if I do that, I have no pain. No pain at all. I've also discovered that many people with knee problems is because they're carrying too much weight. And when we take on God's formula of having breakfast like a king and lunch like a queen and having a very light supper and drinking lots of water between meals and starting to exercise, it's an easy way to lose the weight. As one man said to me after doing our program, in the first 4 months, he lost 20 pounds. And he came off all his medication, and yet he was in his 60s, and his doctor said, oh, and you don't have to have the knee replacement operation anymore because the knees are happy because the weight's gone. So it's actually investigating why. So once all of these are changed, then, okay, in other words, don't bypass the first 3. Only then you can assist nature in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. Then the castor oil, then the comfrey, whatever is necessary. Last night I told the story of the little boy who had the swollen finger because the blister had broken and dirt got into it. And how this little 7-year-old was on painkillers, he was on antibiotics, he was on sleeping tablets. And we did the simple hot and cold treatment on him. 3 minutes hot, 30 seconds cold, 3 times. Grated potato poultice on, he slept all night. And the mother said, what'll I do with the medication? I said, I'll leave it up to you. I can tell you what I do, but I have no authority over your medication. Only you and your doctor do. And I don't usually have to tell people what I would do because I think that is quite obvious. See, no need for all that, just the simple, natural remedies. And the reason why they're so powerful is because they work with the healing powers in the body. And last night we looked at the immune system and how the immune system, it's our body's healing inside our body. There are many different types of pain. I have given birth to 6 babies, and I decided that birth doesn't necessarily have to be what many call painful. And I read a book by Dr. Grantley Dick Reed. He's an English doctor. He's an obstetrician. And it was written, I think, in about the 50s, 60s. And his book's called Childbirth Without Fear/Pain. And he used to watch women scream all through their labours. And you know, the doctor's trying to do anything, and they know if they give the mother pain-killing medication, then the baby can be born and not breathe quickly because it'll come through the placenta. And he was called to a little room. It was in a set of apartments. A lady was having a baby. He went into the room and he stopped because this lady was on the bed and she was breathing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's breathing through her contractions. Then she'd take a deep breath and she'd just rest. Then the other contraction had come and she'd breathe, breathe, breathe and count. Do you know what this doctor did? He just stepped back and he watched. He'd never seen this. And then her breathing changed and a guttural sound started to come, and he knew she was starting to push the baby out. So he went over and he helped the baby come out. He went home that night and thought, what did I see tonight? Here are all these women screaming, and here's this woman, hardly a sound, just breath and guttural sounds. He said, why? Why? Don't you love it? When God puts in someone's mind the want to know why. Because there's always a reason. And he studied the abdominal area, and he noticed that when a woman is having a contraction, that's involuntary. But when she's fearful, her muscles contract, and the fear causing the muscles to contract, hitting against the involuntary contraction, causes a lot of pain. I read this book and I thought, right, that's what my births are going to be like now. I had 4 more babies and I breathed. I breathed deeply. It's strong. It's labour, all right. I breathed through every contraction. And I'm so glad, because I didn't realise by my 5th baby, they thought I had a long time to go and they left me, and the baby came and I delivered that baby myself, which was an incredible experience. And of taking this baby out of your body. And I thought, why don't they let women do this? Do you know, God has said, he said, I have not given you the spirit of fear. And that's what it was. It was fear. He says, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power. Isn't knowledge power? Of love. And God is love. He made this body. He made it to work. And a sound mind. What a sound mind does is it weighs up the pros and the cons. And so then I did as much as I could to help other mothers to go through their births like this, so that they could have childbirth without pain. And even when that head is coming through the birth canal, the whole area numbs. It need not be. We probably heard about Chinese women who squat, give birth to their baby, wrap them up and go back to the fields. Have you heard that? And none of us think, oh, as if. Do you know it happens? I've had friends that have seen it. Birth is not a sickness. It's a very natural thing, and yet many people fear it. So I have 3 daughters who all had babies, and they all had babies naturally, and most of them it was all home births, because they grew up in a home where they didn't hear any scary stories about birth. So that's one thing we classify as pain. So I wanted to show you it's not necessary. We need to be educated. We need to know exactly what's happening in birth, and we need to ride it and go through it. So pain. I have worked with a couple of people over the last 3 years who've had serious accidents. One man, his hand went through a roller. Eugh. Can you imagine the pain of that? Squashed fingers. And within 24 hours, the top of 2 of his fingers started going black. And the doctor wanted to cut them off, and that's when his wife contacted me. I said, wait, wait. And I said, cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper moves blood. And the blood's the life of the flesh. Those black tips needed blood. So I said, get aloe vera, which has a growth stimulant in it, and sprinkle the cayenne pepper on, cover it with the fingers and wrap them up. He kept those 2 fingers, the tips. He kept them. But what about the pain? I told him about cayenne pepper. Did you know that cayenne pepper is an analgesic? And my attention was first brought to this when I was in Bermuda. When I was in Bermuda, it was about maybe 2017. I was staying in a home where the lady was a lawyer and the man was a construction worker. And they were in their late 40s. And the construction worker man, he was very stocky, well-built. And I mostly had to do with the lady, but she wasn't there one evening, and he came to me and he said, I've got a story for you. He said, I hurt my back. Why would he hurt his back? Not lifting like this. We've got to lift properly. We've got to look after our back because we're the ones that suffer if it's not working. That's why if Jack's not with me and I can't see a strong young man and I've got to get my big bag off the baggage claim, you know what I do? I engage my quads, I engage my core. Because I've got to live with this back. And I've had a few injuries, but you know I have no pain if I look after it. If I keep my core strong, 35 push-ups every morning. Do you do your push-ups every day? I'm a lady, so I can do ladies' push-ups. Keep the core strong. Keep the core very strong. So let's go back to the story I was telling you, which I forget what I was telling you. Bermuda, the construction worker. Thank you. And he said, I got a story. I really hurt my back. He said, I couldn't sleep. The pain was out of control. But he said, I don't do painkillers. And he said, and he's just walking the floor. The pain is just through the roof. And he said, God impressed his mind, cayenne pepper. Take half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And he thought that was the craziest thing that he'd ever heard, but he really believed God was speaking to him. So he got half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, put in a bit of water, threw it down, tingled a little bit, but it settles. And he said within 10 minutes his pain levels had gone from 8, 9 out of 10 down to 7 out of 10. So he took another half teaspoon. Over the next half hour he took 3 half teaspoons and his pain level came down to 3, 4 out of 10. You can sleep with 3 or 4 out of 10 pain. And he slept. So the next day he rang his brother who lives in America and said, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me last night. And his brother's a naturopath. He said, yeah, cayenne pepper is an analgesic. It has a pain-killing effect. So the man, this is 2 years later, who put his hand through the roller, I said, cayenne pepper, take 2 capsules 3 times a day. And he said those 2 capsules, he said sometimes he'd even take it every 2 hours when the pain was intense. He said they gave him more relief than Tylenol. Cayenne pepper. Wow. Cayenne pepper's almost a first aid kit in one. No wonder I travel everywhere with it. Stomach's upset, take some cayenne pepper. Got a sore throat, take some cayenne pepper. And as you'll find out a little bit later today, it's an amazing herb for the heart. Jethro Kloss, he wrote a book called Back to Eden. He devotes half a page to every herb, and he devotes 10 pages to cayenne pepper. Got that? 10 pages. It's such a remarkable herb. And so when, about a year ago, I was called to this young girl, and she was riding a motorbike, she's 17, and she only had, you call them flip-flops, we call them thongs, on a motorbike, not a good idea. The chain got caught, she went over, her toes got, and the top of her three top first toes was taken off. In fact, I couldn't get there till the next day. Her father works at SES, Search and Rescue, so he's used to dealing with this. And he said, we actually don't want to go to hospital because we know they're going to want to fully vaccinate my daughter. We don't want any poisons in her. And we've all decided, we're going to do this at home. She's the youngest of 6 children. So I was able to get there the next day, and woo, what a gruesome sight. And the father took me to the fridge, and he took out of the fridge this little knob. I said, what's that? He said, that's the top of the middle toe. So the middle toe from the knuckle up had clean come off. The big toe was just mangled, the top fleshy bit, and the third toe just had the top off it. And you'll find this in medicine today. When they dress a wound, sometimes they will not dress it for 2 days. Sometimes they'll dress it every 24 hours, but no shorter because it interferes with those new cells growing. Now, this family had a huge crop, as big as this stage just about, of aloe vera. Aloe vera has a growth stimulant, and the other herb that has a growth stimulant is comfrey. So we had comfrey and cane and aloe vera, and he'd get 2 big slabs of aloe vera. If you keep the skin on the slab, it doesn't dry out. Because one of the problems with aloe vera is if the edges dry out, and then they stick to the skin, and when you try and take it off, you can tear the skin. But if you keep the skin, obviously you cut off the little barbs on the side. And so with her toe, they'd put a whole slab one side and a whole slab the other, and they'd clean it with hydrogen peroxide, and they would sprinkle a little cayenne pepper in. Now, because it was raw flesh, and there weren't a lot of... most of the nerve endings we have are right next to our skin. So, of course, this had cut that off. Now, she had 3 big brothers, and they'd hold her legs and squeeze her thighs, because the hardest time was when the dressing was changed. That was the hardest time for her. But she found if she took the cayenne pepper, she didn't have to take any painkillers. She just took cayenne pepper. She took capsules of cayenne pepper, and she was able to cope with the pain. Isn't that incredible? Do you know they totally healed? I can't say that the middle toe grew another knuckle, but the flesh on the back of the big toe, it puffed out. You see, the cayenne pepper brought the blood, and the blood's the life of the flesh. It brings the nutrients, oxygen, water. And the aloe vera contains a growth stimulant. If you have an aloe vera plant, you cut the top ½ inch off one of the leaves, and you time how long it takes to grow a skin. It'll grow a skin in about an hour. That's an indication of the growth stimulant that is in the aloe vera. Isn't it incredible the way God gave us those herbs as healers? So when I moved into the house I'm into now, which is 15 years ago, the first thing I planted around my house was aloe vera and comfrey. I alternated them, aloe vera, comfrey, because they're such remarkable herbs. So that girl, her toes, they look a little different, but they healed. Now that was very, very brave, because that was a serious, serious injury. But she experienced the pain-killing effect of the cayenne pepper. Probably the easiest way to do it is to take it in capsule form. So we have found some people the knees are painful. Then we have to have a look at starting to get the weight off. But castor oil compresses overnight, that can make a huge difference, the way it totally healed my hand. Because remember, the castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil, and wherever it penetrates, it breaks up lumps, bumps, adhesions. Probably where most people experience pain is past injuries. old injuries. So they will ever have to be managed. If it's in the spine, it can be managed by strengthening the core muscles. If there is inflammation there, one of the best poultices at getting inflammation out of an area, a joint area, is ginger. And when you make the ginger poultice, you get a cloth this big, let's say this is for lower back, you grate about approximately 2 teaspoons of grated ginger, and then you pull this over, pull this one over, pull this down, pull this up, and now we've got a package. And you've got a few layers in the background where you made your package. And what you will see is you'll see the juice starting to come through, and then you place that on the skin and you cover it with plastic. Over the top you put plastic on because plastic insulates it, plastic also protects the clothes, and plastic protects chilling. And if it's lower back and you apply that on and cover it with plastic, often stretchy underwear can hold it in place. And we have found within half an hour, when someone's got a really sore back, the inflammation comes right down. But I do warn people, the skin can get quite hot. It appears that the grated ginger pulls the inflammation out of the joint to the skin. So the person might wear it for a few hours. If it gets too hot, just take it off, wipe the area, and maybe then they'll wear a castor oil compress on the area overnight. A very simple formula I gave you last night. If there's a problem, you look at the history to find out why that area is sore. And then the symptoms, they tell you where to go and what to do. Another excellent anti-inflammatory is ice. If something's inflamed, just ice massage. Just keep moving it round and round and round until the whole area is numb. And what you're doing now is you're watching for the body's response, because your body's response will tell you, I like that, that is really helping. So it's learning to listen. And that is something many people have forgotten how to do, is learning to listen. Well, what about a headache? Well, there's a very simple treatment for a headache, and that's a hot foot bath. But if someone's got cold feet, you can't put their feet in a hot foot bath, so you put them in a warm foot bath. And as the feet warm up, then you can increase the heat. And usually that hot foot bath is for 20 minutes. So we have many people with headaches on the first day at our retreat, because most people are addicted to coffee. And when they stop the coffee, then the headaches come. And so we give hot foot baths. We massage the shoulders and we ease them through that first 24 hours. But I had a lady come to me in Ireland. She said to me, my daughter, she's mid-30s, she said, my daughter was born, she said, 2 years ago. And since then I've had a migraine every day. So you know what that told me? We're looking at the history. When did the migraines begin? When she had her baby. What happens when you have a baby? The hormones are disrupted. So I suggested that she apply the wild yam cream. The wild yam cream is a cream made out of the Mexican wild yam. And it has a plant chemical in it that stimulates the pathways that the body uses to balance the hormones. You see, our body runs according to precision balance. So she applied the cream, and she told me the next day that the migraine went away. It was starting to rise at the end of the day, and it went away. The next morning when she woke up, the migraine started to come. She applied the cream, the migraine went away. I said, well, that's very good news. What's her body's response saying? Yes, you're on the right track. 2 weeks later, I was in another part of Ireland. She travelled 2 hours to see me. She said, it's been 2 weeks. She said, I've not had a migraine. Now, it's not the only cause of a migraine, but it was certainly in this case. And what alerted me that it was because of the hormones is because it began looking at her history with the birth of her child. Sometimes a migraine can be because of a skull out of alignment or the neck. That's why I say visit a chiropractor or an osteopath and have that. Sometimes it can be just dehydration because our brain is 85% water. If we're not drinking enough water, then our brain will start to ache. So just touching on a few areas where pain may be a problem. And if pain is a problem, look at the history. It will give you an indication as to why. And look at the symptoms, and they're the areas you target. Maybe it's a poultice. Maybe it's a water treatment. Or as with the man who had that serious accident, he had to start strengthening his core muscles. Because we can't do much about the skeletal system, but we have total say over the muscular, the tendon, and the ligament system. And little by little, you can build those up. Once again, I thank God that He's given us a body that has an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And after the stories I've shown you this morning, I think it's still morning, we can say with the psalmist in Psalm 139 verse 14, I will praise you, for I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And as we go through these series, you will be confronted with the fact that everything we need, we have got. And I trust the stories I've related to you are indications of that fact, is that everything we need, we've got. But Psalm 32 verse 8, God has given us a promise. He said, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. So please pray, no matter what your situation is, because God has promised that He will instruct you and He'll teach you in the way you should go. Let us close with a word of prayer. Father, thank you for coming to us this morning. Thank you for teaching us, and thank you for this body. Thank you for making it simple. And thank you that we are here. It is by no accident that we are here. And we thank you this morning in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.